Hello and welcome to this podcast from the BBC World Service. Please let us know what you think and tell other people about us on social media. Podcasts from the BBC World Service are supported by advertising.
The Amazon River. My younger mind couldn't help but marvel at its mysterious nature. I'd always imagined it to be a worthy contender for which river would claim the prize-winning fight for the title of greatest river on Earth. I'd visualize the names of two challengers echoing out in a gladiatorial coliseum. In the blue corner, we have the amazing Amazon. And in the red corner, the jewel that is the Nile. Now, having been born to Ghanaian parents, the purist in me was somewhat satisfied with Africa being able to claim victory for the world's longest river, the Nile. But by far the biggest river by volume, the Amazon was in a league all of its own. I'm still yet to visit the Amazon basin, but I have traveled to the Pantanal wetlands in Brazil, specifically to the Boducana Plateau. This area neighbors the Amazon basin and shares many of its characteristics. It was one of the most exciting and dangerous wildlife expeditions I've ever been on. These 150,000 square kilometer wetlands and surrounding ecosystem are home to some seriously supersized animals. Jaguars here grow twice as big as others on the continent, with the riverbanks also providing the ideal home for the world's largest rodent, capybaras, which graze daily on the abundant and lush vegetation. Joining me on my expedition of the Boducana Plateau, a group of experts whose continuing mission was to explore the region's large animals to get a better picture of the overall health of the waterways. As we slowly ventured upriver, something I describe as halfway between a breathy whinny of a horse and the soothing purr of a cat, gave away the arrival of our welcoming committee, giant river otters. There's only about 5,000 of them left in the entire world, with most located in and around our location. Their territorial calls eventually gave way to more curious behavior, as one by one they approached the boat, bobbing their heads up and out of the water to get a closer look at us. Measuring in at 2 meters from head to tail, giant river otters are voracious hunters who absolutely love fish. With the waters of this region teeming with over 300 species, you can understand why it's such a vital habitat for them. What that expedition revealed was that the watery landscape of the Pantanal and the neighboring Amazon basin support a huge diversity of life. An incredible fifth of all water that runs on the Earth's surface is carried by the Amazon River, and it's this that's key to its abundance. Now, the Amazon isn't just home to giant creatures, but also to other smaller yet no less terrifying predators. Not least the notoriously lethal piranha fish, whose razor-sharp teeth can cut through flesh within seconds. But some wildlife have evolved to protect themselves against such predators. In particular, one remarkable fish which has developed an ingenious means of shielding itself from jagged jaws. And now, its super scaly skin could be the inspiration for a new type of body armor. Hi, I'm Patrick I, and this is the second season of 30 Animals That Made Us Smarter, an original podcast from the BBC World Service, which explores how animals have helped us solve human problems and have inspired some amazing inventions along the way. I really hope you're enjoying the series so far. Please make sure you share it with at least one friend that you think might like it. And of course, don't forget to join the conversation. On social media, the hashtag is 30animals. So, let us know what you think. We're keen to get some of your expertise into our episodes too. What examples do you know of when it comes to animals inspiring new designs or new technology? Write down your ideas and drop us an email at 30animals@bbc.com, or you can contact us through our website, bbcworldservice.com/30animals. But for now, let's head back to that watery landscape, because in this episode, arapaima fish and armor, we'll hear how the scales of this remarkable fish are inspiring a new, tough, but flexible type of armor. Despite my adventures through the Brazilian wetlands, the only glimpse I've ever had in person of the arapaima fish was sadly in a restaurant aquarium. And no, don't worry, before you ask, I didn't order it for dinner. But even there, I could see that this Amazonian giant was something special. Looking at it was like taking a glimpse back through time. Arapaimas are one of the oldest freshwater fish in the world and have been described as living fossils, even as dinosaur fish. Their green broad heads, long streamlined bodies, and massive red tails have been swimming through the rainforest waterways for more than 20 million years. They're also one of the largest freshwater fish in the world and have been known to grow to up to 3 meters long. And the biggest specimen ever found weighed in at a massive 200 kilograms. That is the same weight as a small bottlenose dolphin, which is pretty big for a fish that lives in rivers. As I found out from my trip to the restaurant, arapaimas must also be pretty tasty. Known locally in Brazil as pirarucu or paiche, they're sometimes called the cod of the Amazon. For centuries, they've been fished by local people who dry and salt their flesh to preserve it. Now, one of the arapaima's adaptations that I found quite curious was that they don't use their gills to breathe. I know, a fish that doesn't use its gills to breathe. So how do they survive? Well, they instead take in air through a modified swim bladder that opens into the fish's mouth and acts like a primitive lung, which is a really neat adaptation. This does, however, mean that they have to swim to the surface every 10 to 20 minutes to take a breath. If you're ever close to an arapaima, you'll know it's coming up for air because it makes a noisy and distinctive gulp, which sounds a bit like and can be heard from quite some distance. So, why has a fish evolved to have gills that it doesn't use? Well, the arapaimas breathe this way because the floodwater lakes where they tend to live are low in oxygen. As the floodwater drains away in the dry season, the lakes become clogged with decaying vegetation, causing the oxygen levels to go down even more. That's because the biological process of decomposition uses up, you guessed it, oxygen. But thanks to its air-breathing lung, the arapaima is able to thrive in these waters, feasting on fish who find themselves cut off from the faster-flowing rivers. Now, it may sound like the arapaimas have worked out how to live an easy life in these floodwater lakes, but it turns out they're not the only predator swimming around. The lakes also attract shoals of another famous Amazonian fish, which likes to lay its eggs among the rotting vegetation. And it has one brutal bite: the piranha. If you're anything like me, you'll be very familiar with piranhas. At one point, my cousins and I became obsessed with them. I'd squirm, but also relish in the pinnacle of an action movie where the baddie would dispose of his or her enemies by throwing them into a piranha-infested tank and would watch with glee as the feeding frenzy began. Between my cousins and I, the debate would rage on for weeks on exactly how long it would take for a person to be eaten alive. After all, It's true that these fish are known the world over as one of Mother Nature's most terrifying predators. In the language of the Brazilian Tupi people, the word piranha translates as tooth fish, and for good reason too. Piranhas have rows of sharp triangular teeth which come together like a pair of scissors. Their jaws are powered by huge muscles that take up most of the space in their heads, which gives them an extremely strong bite. When they grab hold of their prey, they'll start thrashing their tails back and forth to help them prise flesh away from bone, which means if they're eating a small animal or fish, they can reduce it to a skeleton within seconds. The piranhas that live in the Amazon's floodwater lakes tend to feed during the day. As the waters go down and food becomes scarce, the piranhas become more aggressive, eating anything they can find. They've also been known to grab birds that land on the water's surface. Because of this, many other species only feed at night in order to best avoid their bite. But the arapaima, with its need to breathe at the surface every 10 to 20 minutes, doesn't have this luxury. The arapaima has developed an ingenious protection system. The fish's body is covered in layers of grey-green armor-like scales, tightly layered one on top of another. Even when grasped by the piranha's powerful jaws, these scales don't tear or crack. The arapaima has essentially evolved its own body armor. But what's remarkable about this body armor is, unlike the type we're more familiar with, worn by soldiers, the fish scales armor is super flexible. This means that although arapaimas are tough and thick-skinned, they can also move easily in the water and quickly swim away from danger if they need to. Having grown up in Brazil, scientist Mark Myers, professor at the University of California in San Diego, was fascinated by tales of the rainforest and the creatures that lived there. As a young man, he decided to visit the Amazon basin with his friends. It took them traveling for 2 grueling days on the back of a truck to finally reach the river. When they arrived, hot and tired, the group wanted to jump straight into the water to cool off, but stopped themselves just in the nick of time when they realized it was teeming with piranha. They'd all heard the stories of people who'd fallen off boats only to be eaten alive and weren't keen on repeating the experience. But Mark Myers noticed that the arapaima fish were able to swim happily in this environment. Somehow, they were protected from any attack from the piranhas. Years later, as part of a research team at the University of California, Myers began to investigate exactly why the arapaima was so piranha resistant. He was already aware of how tough the upper layer of the arapaima fish scales were. He'd seen local women use them to file their nails. But just how tough were they? And did these scales have some other property that was helping to protect the fish? Myers asked a friend in Brazil to send him a box of scales so he and his team could examine them more closely. Immediately, they noticed that the scales were far thicker than the scales from other large fish. When it came to studying the outer layer, this is the part of the scale that was being used by the local women as a nail file, they noticed it had a similar composition to that of human bone, but contained more mineral deposits and was much harder. But it was only when they observed the entire scale under a high-powered microscope that they understood why it was so remarkable. Instead of being smooth, the scientists observed that the tough outer layer of the arapaima scale contained ridges and bumps, a bit like the furrows you see in a plowed field, which were arranged in a zigzag pattern. This meant that although this layer was extremely strong, it also had a level of flexibility. But it was the discovery of what was happening in the scale's silvery red inner layers that was even more exciting. Here, the team found long strands of the protein collagen, the same type of protein that makes up human skin. These strands were bundled together to make tiny fibers with a thickness of only 1 micrometer. That's barely 1/100th of the width of a strand of human hair. So, very, very thin. The fibers were arranged in sheets which lay one on top of the other, each slightly rotated against the one above. The result was a spiral staircase-like construction known as a Boulier-Gang type structure. What this showed was that even if a sharp tooth was able to break through the hard outer layer of the scale, they wouldn't be able to crack or tear the complex collagen structure beneath. To test this theory out, the scientists made a crack in one scale and soaked it in water for 48 hours. They then pulled its edges apart whilst adding pressure to a central point. As they did, they saw that part of the hard outer layer of the scale expanded, cracked, and then gradually peeled off. But the scale underneath remained intact. On closer inspection, they saw that the collagen fibers had lost their neat spiral staircase-like construction and instead had lined up to face the direction of the force. This meant the fibers were providing the maximum resistance possible. Even under intense pressure, the inner collagen layers, although they moved and deformed, didn't break. It's this property that makes the arapaima scale amongst the toughest and most flexible biological materials on the planet. This discovery has the potential to inspire a new type of body armor. Currently, the plastic polymers used for flexible armor can still be punctured by some bullets and knives. A new synthetic material that's hard on the outside but bends like the inner and outer layers of the arapaima scales whilst remaining strong would be the perfect answer to bullets and other weapons. Mark Meyer's team in California is currently looking at 3D printers to produce this. And that's not all. The inner Boulier-Gang structure of the arapaima scales could be used in aerospace design to make the protective casing of jet turbines and space vehicles. It could even be used by submarines to help them hide from their opponents, because this new material also has the awesome ability to absorb the energy given off by the craft, making it undetectable by sonar. In fact, the discovery of how the Boulier-Gang structure works is sparking a revolution in materials engineering. All this inspired by the scales that have protected arapaima in the piranha-infested waters of the Amazon for millions of years. Soon, soldiers and service personnel all around the world may have a prehistoric coughing fish to thank for their safety. Head on over to the BBC World Service website for more information on this episode. You can find it at bbcworldservice.com/30animals. In the next episode of 30 Animals That Made Us Smarter from the BBC World Service, I'll be hearing how the blood of a horseshoe crab has inspired a synthetic version which could help preserve these animals and in the process keep us safe. Don't forget to spread the word now. It's #30animals. Thanks for listening.